I wanted to talk real quick about the border and sort of what we're seeing down there. It's earlier this year, all of a sudden, right-wing people, the local AM talk radio, these two meatheads that don't know anything, they were saying things like, "Of course you apply for asylum at the port of entry. Everyone knows that. We have no choice but to prosecute these people who are entering illegally." And suddenly this thing that nobody knew or cared about became, common knowledge, I guess, this idea that the place to apply for asylum is at the port of entry. Now, if you're caught entering illegally, you can still apply for asylum, but this sort of got injected into, mainstream thinking. And so what did these people do? Well, they go to a port of entry, and now we're being told that that's also not the way to do it. I think a couple days ago, the port at San Ysidro had conducted something like 20 asylum interviews. And this is a problem that's been building up now for years, not just recently, but in Tijuana specifically. They've outsourced a kind of lottery system to the Mexican government so that only a limited number of people can be interviewed per day. And so there were already people from all over the world camping out in Tijuana waiting for their turn when the caravan arrived. And this whole thing reminds me of.
Let me just wait. Let me just.
Yeah.
I want to just highlight that point. People come from all around the world, fly in to Mexico, and then presuming that they're going to get an opportunity to be interviewed for asylum. Maybe they come from an African country with, famine or, whatever, or they come from Syria, and they attempt to go into a port of entry there because there's only two countries. I'm not sure if people knew this. There's only two countries that actually abut the United States physically. And you probably know this because you're an immigration attorney, but it's Mexico and Canada. People may not realize this. Mexico, less expensive than Canada. So if you were going to go to, if you wanted to apply for asylum legally, what you would need to do is to go to one of those two countries and wait in line, essentially, to get an asylum. You would go to the less expensive of the countries, because you would save money if you were, let's say, poor and coming from a place where, all of your ownings were destroyed in a natural disaster or a war, or the government had decided to take all of your stuff because they were politically oppressing you. And so you have people there from all around the world who come in and they spend what little money they have left waiting for an interview, right? I mean, how many of those people do you think there are?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think there's thousands of people like that in Tijuana, which is obviously a real stress on their local, everything, right? Their economy and everything else. And what we've done, like I said, is outsource a kind of lottery system to the Mexican government to allow a certain number of interviews per day. The crazy thing is, this has been happening forever. I mean, it's not anything unusual, and this is, the most politicized thing I've ever seen in my life. And we're told, we can't even discuss, gun control after a school shooting because that's politicizing something. This is taking something that's been happening for years and years and years, and the whole, sending the troops and shutting down the ports of entry. I've got a friend, she's an attorney. She runs a nonprofit in Tijuana, and she's there now, and she doesn't know if she'll be able to come back. She has court tomorrow. All of this is pure theatrics, and we have the capacity as a country to put into place the infrastructure we need to make sure that people get their interviews, and if they qualify, great, and if not, they'll be sent back. but everybody's community is full of people who have either been granted asylum or who came this way and they're waiting for their hearings. And you're surrounded by those people and you don't realize it because they're just living their lives normally and like not
or they're
disrupting
sleeper cells
anything.
is what you're saying.
Right. They could be, coming here to have terror babies. We don't know, but that's their long game, obviously.
Did you have that MS-13 audio of them being like, Ronald Raygun's our most effective lawyer?
That's the ad I run locally. It's in Spanish.
We have sleeper cells across the Pacific Northwest, and he calls in to talk to Sam and say that we're doing nothing.
I mean, I think what's happening, though, is not unlike the dynamic that John Sides, and I'm just saying this from just sheer speculation, but that the dynamic where Donald Trump got left or liberal people who are liberal on race that much more liberal, or even people who are moderate on race that much more liberal in response. I think there is a growing awareness of immigration as an issue. The interesting thing is that there's becoming, and there needs to be, because I don't think there is a cohesive position on immigration in this country on the left. To the extent that I'm not aware of cohesion, and it ranges from no borders to, I guess, the center left, saying some type of guest worker program, which seems to me maybe is really more accurately described as center right. But let me ask you this: what would you say should be if you were in charge of the left, Ronald Raygun, what would be the immigration policy that you would promote? What would be the principles of that policy?
Yeah, so I think that you have to have a broad, aggressive amnesty. People are undocumented because the laws are broken and ill-conceived, and so they need to be changed.
All right, so amnesty,
that means
that to me is low-hanging fruit. Amnesty for people who are here without documentation, get them into the system, make them citizens. What do you do going forward?
Well, I think that you need to make it easier for people to come here to work if they want to, which means having more visas available to the industries that need foreign workers. And I think you also have
Unlimited?
to couple it with well, I think it needs to match labor demand somehow. I don't know about
unlimited,
but
right? I mean, how do you measure that?
Yeah.
How do you measure that? I mean, so unlimited, and those visas got to be you're fully documented. So theoretically, you could belong to a union, and people could be protected in some respect. Yes.
Yeah, I think you have to match it with certain really strong labor protections. I have actually another one of those family members that you hypothesized might exist earlier. Tell me that there's no such thing as a labor shortage. There's just employers who aren't willing to pay to get the job done right, which is like, he's really conservative, but it was like a small glimmer of wokeness. It's true that a lot of the undocumented labor force exists because of exploitation, and I think you could quell or sort of satisfy some of the concerns that people have with the depression of wages and so forth by coupling immigration reform with a higher minimum wage or guaranteed benefits or things like that, so that the American worker doesn't feel like he's being displaced by a new aggressive worker visa program. And so some of that has to happen too. And the problem is the left doesn't really want to admit that that's a problem. And so I don't know, it does get complicated, but I just think and there's also just two
so
or
who
three
should be
little
allowed to
things that,
become a citizen? Who should be allowed to become a citizen?
Well, the rule right now is you have to be a permanent resident for 5 years. you have to speak English, you have to, not be deportable and be deserving of a discretionary grant of naturalization. I don't know that that needs to change. The question would be who gets to become a permanent resident. And so that's where you would have to implement, like I said, an amnesty to allow people who are either undocumented or there are people who've been on TPS now for like 20 years, and they're about to go back to being completely and wholly undocumented. And so you have to have a program.
But I've already granted a total amnesty. Everybody who's in the country, you have a path to citizenship. You're all legal now, and you're under protection. It's just going forward is the question.
Yeah, I think there used to be for a while a program called Registry where you could basically, and I think they have this actually in Europe too, where you can just show that you've been here for a certain amount of time, subject yourself to a background check, show that you paid your taxes, and you can earn your permanent residency. It's not.
But what do you do if you show up at the border? Do we let everybody in?
Well, I don't think that. I don't know. Honestly, that's complicated. I tend to be.
You know what he's afraid of?
Open borders.
He's afraid of losing his work as an immigration attorney. Open borders means you don't get to work, right?
You better.
It's classic.
No.
It's classic.
That's not true.
It's classic.
Oh, God.
Just like one of those climate change scientists.
I'm looking out for numero uno over here. But
there you go. Yeah.
I tend to be for open borders, but it does get complicated. But at the same time, I do think that, it's a lot of the things that we're afraid of happening won't happen. I've got a lot of clients who would love to go back and spend their winters in Mexico, but their laws keep them trapped here. And having more open borders, maybe not completely open, but having a lot more flexibility in allowing people to come and go is better, because we know that freedom is the goal, and freedom and liberty are awesome. And
as long as you get paid, right? So you're not saying total open borders, as long as you have proper documentation that, let's say, an immigration attorney could write up for you.
No, so
mass sales.
After the amnesty, I want an immigration lawyer bailout.
There you go.
And then I'll go retire somewhere. But
he's got it all planned out.
Yeah.
Typical. All right, Ronald Raygun. Appreciate the call. I'm with you on this.
Alrighty.
I appreciate the call. I'm with you. I don't. You can have what you can have what, open borders. It could mean a lot of different things.
I think that we should be looking at some type of, if NAFTA was a political project, not just the corporate project, or if things like
NAFTA, you want the superhighway?
I do. Or Mercer, the Association of Latin American States, the Caribbean. I think there's no reason why you couldn't think of an America's wide, somewhat EU analogous. I think that would be great.
That would certainly make things easier. That's not open borders per se. No, it's more like just free passage.
Free passage, demilitarized, and you. Anybody who's gone to a Schengen country, knows it is, significantly easier and more humane, even for like the easiest travel possible, which is literally, just flying to another country to go spend a couple weeks there. It's night and day, even for that.